Stones on my beginner's mind. I have to tell you guys, I don't know what it is about this chapter. I have had it ready for weeks, and I was a little resistant to it. And here we are. It is, as I pointed to last week, traditional Zen Spirit, which is the first in part 3 of right understanding. Many years ago, when I was an English major, I had a teacher that says you should always look at the content. It tells you a lot about a book. Interesting that this is right practice, right attitude, right understanding. It isn't unpurposeful. It's very much Zen, which is we practice first. Then, what's next? Right attitude. What motivates us? And then we get to understanding. Isn't that interesting? Most of us think, I gotta understand. All right, I'll work on my attitude. Yeah, sure. And then, I want to get to some practice that I want to be in. That's, the correct practice, the right practice, the good practice. All right, traditional Zen Spirit. The most important thing in our practice are our physical posture and our way of breathing. Which, by the way, if you went to right practice, what's the first 2 chapters? Posture and breathing. We are not so concerned about deep understanding of Buddhism. As a philosophy, Buddhism is a very deep, wide, and firm system of thought. But Zen is not concerned about philosophical understanding. We emphasize practice. I already went on about the, historically this way. You all know that part. We should understand why our physical posture and breathing exercise are so important. Instead of having a deep understanding of the teaching, we need a strong confidence in our teaching, which says that originally we have Buddha nature. Our practice is based on this faith. You could say the whole chapter. I just read to you the whole chapter. I could actually also say, I've told you everything about Zen. Everything about Zen is in this first paragraph. When you go to get Zazen instruction or any instruction on meditation, we tell you the posture, and we tell you the breath, and then we say face the wall, and that's it. There's no instruction in the meditation hall for the most part. Hardly ever. Of course, here we mix it with insight, and that's why. And since the pandemic, I'll admit that I say more during meditation. And I continue because it's a way for us to be connected. And we're also learning, right? It's great to say, well, just sit down, face the wall, be with life as it is. That's fundamentally Zazen. But it's hard to do that in a consistent, ongoing way. Because I know for me, some sound and I react, a sense of self arises. Even after today, the instruction, and then I decide to leave the sound on. There was some kind of noise upstairs, and right away, a self arose. Why are they so noisy? What is that sound? Sound like a beeping? That there's a noise into me or us. So the self arises. So we want to know how to work with that. And I think that's important. And fundamentally, though, in Zen, our practice is not to do that to fix ourselves or to get rid of the self. This is the kind of the irony or the paradox, perhaps a better word, of practice, of Zen practice in particular. Don't forget that to me, Zen practice is much more focused on when does the self arise and how does that bring suffering, and when is there a self that when you let it go, it brings less suffering for yourself or other people. Before Bodhidharma, people thought that after a long preparation, sudden enlightenment would come. The Zen practice was a kind of training to gain enlightenment. Actually, many people today are practicing Zazen with this idea. Many of you actually, not to shame you, but how many of you at the end, you're like, oh, that was a good Zazen, or that was a bad Zazen. It gave me this, or it didn't give me this. It's hard for us not to have a gaining idea. That's all this I'm trying to say. But this is not the traditional understanding of Zen. The understanding passed down from Buddha to our time is that when you start Zazen, there is enlightenment even without any preparation. Whether you practice Zazen or not, you have Buddha nature. Because you have it, there is enlightenment in your practice. So last week, at least one of you was in, what's the point? What's the fucking point of practice? And in fact, that's Dogen's koan. And he didn't quite say those words in that way. You know, Dogen was like, if I have Buddha nature, then why should I practice? Paraphrasing, right? And so, what is the last line here? Our practice is based on this faith. When I said that the first paragraph tells you everything about Zen. Our practice is based on this faith. It didn't say our practice is deciding if you have it or not, or I have it or you have it, or how can you get it. Our practice is based on this faith. We begin in faith. And in some ways you have to have faith, right? And what is faith, as I define it, people? Strength and confidence. Strength and confidence, which goes back to this. We practice so that we strengthen our confidence. The teachings before Bodhidharma was you got to practice a lot before you can be enlightened. And it had to be a certain kind of practice and by monks in certain monasteries. So then it goes, okay, you're already enlightened. You don't have to go through all that. And knowing that we are Buddha nature is the hardest part. If the question is, why bother? Why do I need to? We need to get to a point in which we understand that question, there's no must behind that question. We're just curious. What is suffering? How is suffering so bad that I need to know more about it? When your suffering gets bad enough, then you really practice. Otherwise, it's just entertainment. You know, which is not bad, but it's just what that is, right? I like it, I don't like it, I choose this version versus that version. It'll be today, no, I'm too tired, I'll do it tomorrow, right? I'll grade it, right? All that's just part of our human karmic happening. And then practice get to a point where we show up no matter that. And that does take work, though. It does take effort. It does take a certain kind of faith, because that stuff is so strong and so loud and has so much karmic energy that we just cycle in that constantly. And so it does ask us to have some faith and to really look at how do we alleviate it, not get rid of it, but how do we alleviate it? Whatever our wish may be. This weekend I was teaching, or did I decide it? A wish is personal wisdom. I kind of like that. A wish is personal wisdom. And I just go, oh, this is how it should be. I wish for it to be like this, right? When you think about it, it's just my idea. That's what a wish is, right? Doesn't mean it's not valid, mind you, or meaningful. I'm not saying that at all. But in a way, when I think about, a wish is just like my personal wisdom. I mean, it gives it, gravitas. But it also reminds me, oh yeah, that's just my idea. This is my idea. This is my wish. how do we make that what we wish for, this personal wisdom, enacted? That's part of practice. How do we gain faith that our personal wisdom has meaning, not just for ourselves, but hopefully for others also, or collectively? We do share some, personal wisdom. Many of us think love. I would say that's and part of our practice is negotiating just my wish of love, my understanding, my personal sense of wisdom of love is different than your. And any relationship is about negotiating. So then with practice, and the part that helps us figure out why bother, in my opinion, is then we say, well, how can I not suffer? For first I go, why bother? There's so much suffering. And then you want to say, well, how can I not suffer? How can there be not suffering in the world? So you have to learn what are the causes of suffering? What are the causes and conditions? And in particular, how do I add to it? How do I create it, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, in the second noble truth, the dukkha is created. Then we might get to the point, then you see, I would say we see the positive of that. How do I know not suffering? There comes a point where we have to, I think, have a sense of it can't just be suffering. It's so hard. It's so depressing. It's so overwhelming. It's hard to keep your faith when you're overcome by just suffering. So you have to be able to have a sense of balance and know, how do I know not suffering? Of course, the I can be a collective I here. Now, we also, part of it is knowing causes and conditions for sure. And it is, I would say, it's focused much more than on the motivation, right? The motivation for how causes and condition come into being. Where is it that I have impact? It's no longer just a personal wish, but it becomes about what happens when I enact it. Am I there for the impact? I have 2 more steps. Maybe steps. I wanted to say, how do I make non-suffering arise? That's how I started out writing it. And then it just became, how does non-suffering arise? Part of it is understanding that it isn't just personal. I'm not the only one that does it. And I think it can get us to the point when we say, how does non-suffering, when we pay more attention to how it doesn't have to arise. That's another way to put it. Not that, be very careful here. I did not say there should not be suffering. That's not what I just said. How do I focus so that the effect is non-suffering? Which is what? The third noble truth. How do I gain confidence that my action, my thinking, my action, my livelihood, personal and collective, is towards non-suffering? Has to be important enough. It has to be the reason why I fucking bother. To me, it has to. By has to, I mean that's what my faith gives me. And it also strengthened my faith, that possibility of non-suffering as possible in this moment or collectively or in the future. So then we arrive at, to me, when you get to that point and you've gone through the whole, I wouldn't quite say, it's not a one-way street by any means, but you have to have all those pieces, I think, to get to the point where you can be with things as they are. The suffering and the non-suffering. There has to be some quality of being able to be with one or the other, especially when one or the other is overwhelming, either by its presence or non-presence. Or when I can't find that, or when why isn't it in my life? Or how can I get more of that? We have to be there for all these arising of the self that feels suffering, that wants it to end, that know that there's more than just suffering, mine or others or the world. And in fact, not just that there's more than that, but in fact, non-suffering is possible. Has to. Because it is already present. And life has both. So it's life as it is. When we're able to harmonize that, we realize that enlightenment is already here. I have to tell you, around the time I sent that picture of Zazen now, actually the night before, to be perfectly honest, me in my backyard, the carp. The little burst was nice. But the day before, there was no burst. But I just sat back there. I love to sit back there and watch it's not even the sun setting, because there's no sun setting. It's not that nice of a view. Just the light, the sky light changing. And I thought, I love my life. And I was a little taken back. I'm the aversive type, don't forget. I was a little taken back. I started to tear. But I love my life. And then I really realized, and this is when the tear just came streaming down, then, is that I love life. Not that I love my life. I thought that came up first, and I think that's just equally important. It was very clear that I love life. I would tell you, most of my life, I could not say that I love life. I really couldn't. In fact, my motto for many years in my teen, 20s, 30s was life's a bitch and then you don't die. That's more suffering, right? That's the kind of, no way is life. No way do I love life. It's just hard. Hard. Life isn't just hard. Life is as it is. The point we emphasize are not the stage we attain, but the strong confidence we have in our original nature and the sincerity of our practice. Our original nature is Buddha nature. Right? You might say, well, what's Buddha nature? That must be that perfect me, that original me, that's that perfect me. Nope, sorry. Buddha nature, there's many ways to talk about it, and basically Buddha nature is the nature that knows we're interconnected and that knows that we are awakened already. And what are we awakened to? That life is precious. So what are you going to do about it? What is your attitude about it? Because that's how it will help you do life. So much of our practice isn't about making life different. So at times, changing things might shift our life in different ways. Like going off to the fucking monastery, or, you know, making time for a retreat or whatever, of course. But essentially, our practice, there's still greed, there's still hatred, there's still delusion, the three poisons. We're never going to escape that. Certainly not in our lifetime. And in Zen, our awakening isn't to get rid of those three. Our practice is to know that while those are poisons, how do we know when we're acting from those, and how do we know when we're not acting from those? And what is the negotiation with them? That's enlightenment. We should practice Zen, original nature and the sincerity of our practice. That's just equally important. That's the how. Mm-hmm. Sincerity to me could be wholehearted, but it's also, hell, it's hard, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying. It has to take a little faith to keep trying. So to me, sincerity is a kind of faith, an earnest faith, you could say. We should practice Zen with the same sincerity as Buddha. If originally we have Buddha nature, the reason we practice Zazen is that we must behave like Buddha. To transmit our ways, to transmit our spirit from Buddha. So we have to harmonize our spirit, our physical posture, and our activity with the traditional way. You may attain some particular stage, of course, but the spirit of your practice should not be based on an egotistic idea. Why we should practice is that we must behave like Buddha. Everything I just said, you could go, yeah. I want to live without hatred, delusion, greed. And I'm confident that this I make is not based on that. And I make is not based on that. And this decision I make is not based on that. And this decision I make is not based on that. This is the difference between me and Buddha. To me, it's the constancy. That's the hardest part. So that we have Buddha nature, but we do not behave like Buddha, because it's very hard to be consistent, because our hate, greed, and delusion is part of our conditioning. We practice so that we can gain more confidence that those are not 24/7 drives. And that then we act from that, no matter the impact. Traditional Buddhist understanding how human nature is without ego. When we have no idea of ego, we have Buddha's view of life. Our egotistical ideas are delusion, covering up our Buddha nature. We are always creating and following them, and in repeating this process over and over again, our life becomes completely occupied by ego-centered ideas. This is called karmic life or karma. The Buddhist life should not be karmic. The purpose of our practice is to cut off the karmic spinning mind. if you're trying to attain enlightenment, that is part of karma. You are creating and being driven by karma. And you're wasting your time on your black cushion. According to Bodhidharma's understanding, practice based on any gaining idea is just a repetition of your karma. Forgetting this point, many later Zen masters have emphasized some stage to be attained by practice. So everything I said to you about the 5 steps or levels, that's just bullshit. Not really. Those are just markers. Those are markers. They're bullshit if you take them to be concretized truth and you hurt yourself or others when you hold them tightly. They're markers. They're ways of us talking so that we can base and evaluate and have some sense of constancy, of awareness, so that we can hold on to our faith, so we can gain more confidence in our Buddha nature. But they're not Buddha nature, nor are they life. Their guidance, their words, their ideas. There's personal wisdom. But Anne, in a way, what is this? Has a person's name on here. Personal wisdom. Pretty personal wisdom and pretty fucking deep personal wisdom. But if I think if Shunryu Suzuki was here and you were saying, well, this is what you mean, if it's going to make you suffer, he's going to go, forget it. Throw the book away. Right? Just sit. That's the other thing. Don't think about it too much. So again, when is it useful to hold on to the sense of self? Now, egotistical isn't the same as having a sense of self. The ego is involved, but egotistical is just driven by personal wisdom, only by my wish. Which doesn't mean at time your wish isn't important, mind you, but when does it get to the point in which that my personal wish brings more suffering to myself or others, right? When do we want to find the self that is motivated, that is inspired, that is efforting as consistently as possible towards non-suffering? So the alleviation towards non-suffering, towards being with life as it is. Who is it that's doing that? So we need to have the self. We're not trying to get rid of the self. We're trying to discern when is finding the self towards the cause of non-harming, towards ease, towards connection, towards love. Sometimes towards conflict, but the motivation is to bring opening or connection, or whatever it is. It's not just all good stuff. That's what I'm trying to say. When is the finding the self purposeful and motivated and clearly motivated? And then again, what's the hard part? Constant, 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 constant. By that I mean constantly motivated, not constant as in solid, because that's not going to happen. When do we solidify And then we need to say, oh, I gotta lose the self here. It's just bringing more suffering in this moment, if nothing else. That's the hard part, right? In a way, you could say the constancy is the constancy of discernment. It takes practice, and it takes a skillful attitude. And what is the biggest skillful attitude of Buddhism? Non-harming. That's my word. Or that's how I would frame it. More important than any stage which you will attain is your sincerity. What did I say sincerity was earlier?
Motivation.
Motivation, earnest motivation, skillful motivation. Yeah, earnest motivation. More important than any stage which you will attain is your sincerity, your right effort. Right effort here means exactly skillful effort from the Eightfold Path. Right effort must be based on a true understanding of our traditional practice. When you understand this point, you will understand how important it is to keep your posture right, as in correct, as in appropriate. When you do not understand this point, the posture and the way of breathing are just a means to attain enlightenment. If this is your attitude, it will be much better to take some drugs instead of sitting in the cross-legged position. Don't forget, he's talking to a whole bunch of hippies who came to have their mind altered without side effects. Really true of Zen Center people, which we'll find out in Crooked Cucumber. If our practice is only a means to attain enlightenment, there's actually no way to attain it. We lose the meaning of the way to the goal. We lose the meaning of the way to the goal. That could have been my question while you were meditating. When is finding or losing the self meaningful? When is it just a goal that you lose sight of the purpose? But when we believe in our way firmly, we have already attained enlightenment. When you believe in your way, enlightenment is there. But when you cannot believe in the meaning of practice which you are doing in this moment, you cannot do anything. You're just wandering around the goal with your monkey mind. You're always looking for something without knowing what you are doing. But when you cannot believe in the meaning of the practice which you are doing in this moment, you cannot do anything. You cannot believe? What is that? Faith! Faith! If you do not have faith in the meaning of the practice which you are doing in this moment, you cannot do anything. This is why we have to clarify what our purpose is, what our practice is, what is our attitude, what is our understanding. I'll tell you, part of the reason I have trouble with this chapter is one is so inspiring. You read it and you go, I got nothing else to say. We could just read this chapter over and over, and that you probably would get much enlightened much faster. But we're not going for that goal, because the meaning of it is we want to be very sincere. that we're for the cause of non-suffering. That our Buddha nature is the interconnectedness. And I'll make the case that the Bodhisattva way is to stay, don't forget, with the difficulty. To stay and build faith so that I can see the Buddha in me, the Buddha that's you. I'll take that back. The Buddha that is me, not in me. The Buddha that is me, the Buddha that is you, and the Buddha that is us all. Buddha comes from Bodhi, which means awaken. What we are awakened to is bodhicitta, the wish to alleviate suffering for all. That's our sincerity. That's the Zen way. That's what we're sincere about. Includes ourselves, mind you. All includes this one. And for sometimes it's important then to find the one that needs the loving. And when is it that it's useful, skillful, meaningful, wholesome to be with others for our collective hurts and pain. And of course, our individual and our collective joys. I'll leave it here and then we'll finish this chapter next week.